and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee-Jiun in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. The number of employed people here in Korea hit an all-time high in May thanks to more added jobs in the construction, education, and real estate sectors. With exports extending their rise, there are growing hopes that the Korean economy may be on track to a solid recovery. So as we inch toward the end of the first half of the year, we look at what's ahead. These stories and more coming right up. The latest jobs report indicates the rate of employment in Korea reached a new high last month amid signs the local economy is improving. But the same data also shows there's still a pressing need for quality jobs in terms of pay and conditions. Our Kim Ji-yeon starts us off.
Data from Statistics Korea released on Wednesday show the number of employed people reached an all-time high last month, citing increased employment in the construction and real estate sectors. And with the number of employed climbing for a fourth straight month, Korea's employment rate also rose to a record high of 61.3%.
The number of people in Korea's overall workforce increased by 375,000 in May compared to the same month last year, with increased employment in the construction and real estate sectors.
This is welcome news for Asia's fourth largest economy, which is showing signs of improvement on the back of stronger exports and a global recovery. However, the same data suggests that there's a need to increase the quality of jobs rather than focusing on their quantity, because the real rate of employment felt by Koreans tells a different story. The unemployment rate stood at 3.6% in May, down 0.1 percentage point on year. Employment in the services sector inched down as domestic consumption remained sluggish. The number of employed in the manufacturing sector has also dropped for the 11th consecutive month, largely due to restructuring in the shipping and shipbuilding industries. The official unemployment rate for young people aged 15 to 29 came to 9.3%, but the real rate is estimated to be near a staggering 23%. With this, the Statistics Agency emphasized the need to increase the number of quality jobs, particularly among the youth, by utilizing the Moon Jae-in government supplementary budget proposal to create jobs. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily.
And moving on to markets, to give us a brief picture of this week's stock market action, we have our Business Daily's markets contributor, Choi Jin-seok, joining us on the phone today. Hello, Jin-seok.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so how are things looking in today's session? It seems the Kospi was on a roller coaster right throughout the day.
Right. The Korean equity market showed a mixed picture. The Kospi fell by 0.09% to close at 2372.64, while the Kosdaq inched up by 0.3% to close at 671. The Kospi market opened the session with an uptick, rising to as high as 2387, which is a new intraday high. However, the index soon gave up early gains in the afternoon as both foreigners and institutional investors were unloading shares. In particular, institutions who bought shares in the morning shifted their position to sell, spooking overall sentiment. Most blue-chip stocks on the Kospi were down, dragging down the entire index as well. Hyundai Motor, which enjoyed a near 3% rally during the session, was almost the only stock showing good performance. Meanwhile, the Kosdaq market stayed in positive territory all session long, once rising to as high as 674, which is a new record for 2017. The U.S. stock market rebounded overnight, and the technology sector performed relatively strongly, and this affected sentiment on the Kosdaq as well.
Now, though foreign investors haven't been buying aggressively in the recent days, still on a monthly basis, they've shown a strong appetite for local shares.
Exactly. Foreign investors remain net buyers of Korean stocks for the sixth straight month in May, with their holdings of local stocks hitting a new record, according to data by the Financial Supervisory Service. Foreign investors bought a net 2.1 trillion Korean won, or $1.8 billion worth of stocks last month. By region, investors from the U.S., France, and Singapore increased their holdings of Korean stocks last month, while investors from China, Switzerland, and Australia offloaded their holdings.
Now, the U.S. Federal Reserve will release the results of its June FOMC meeting soon. So what should investors be looking out for after the meeting?
The results will come out at 3 a.m. tomorrow Korean time, and Chair Janet Yellen will hold a press conference afterwards. Experts and market participants are almost 100% sure the Fed will raise its interest rates, so the focus will be the Fed's future policy path after the June meeting. According to economists, the Fed is likely to raise rates again in September, and the central bank is expected to start reducing its balance sheet in December. Chair Yellen is expected to emphasize that the Fed will gradually raise rates going forward. Therefore, investors will need to keep a close eye on what signals he will give about the issues just listed. One more thing to consider is that Korea and the U.S. are expected to have the same interest rates after the Fed raises rates tomorrow. Historically, foreign investors tend to lead the Korean market when America's interest rates are higher than those of Korea. That's why domestic investors worry that the same thing might happen this time, especially at a time when the Bank of Korea or the BOK has signaled potential tightening. However, different from 2005 to 2007, foreign capital hasn't flowed out of the Korean market yet. Therefore, experts think the market might overcome the potential interest rate turnaround between two countries this time. This is me, Choi Jin-seok for Business Daily.
The Fair Trade Commission is looking to kickstart conglomerate chaebol reform by first making changes that don't require amending current laws. The new FTC chairman Kim Sang-jo explained his plans to use administrative power and ordinances to avoid challenging legislation, citing current difficulties in passing reform bills with the parliament. He also noted such reforms affect countless parties and may have unexpected consequences for markets, and vowed to carry out changes with consistency and within reasonable boundaries. Kim also emphasized the importance of protecting those who face economic disadvantages and added the FTC has the responsibility to protect smaller firms by abuse by conglomerates. Korea's household debt has yet to show clear signs of slowing down, and one report says it's growing at the third fastest rate among the world's economies. This as attention is on how the new government will try to get a handle on the debt piles. Our Eunice Kim has more.
Korea's household debt to GDP ratio as of the end of last year is 92.8%. The figure has climbed nearly 5 percentage points over a span of a year. And that's a pace that comes after only Norway and China, among 43 economies surveyed by the Bank of International Settlements. Comparing the household debt to GDP ratio across nations, Korea's comes in at number 8 and first among emerging economies for the 14th consecutive year. Chasing such a pace, the new government is deep in thought over how to slow it down. The main cause is viewed to be mortgages, and the immediate debate is over whether to revert the relaxed mortgage regulations installed under the Park Geun-hye administration, particularly when it comes to the loan-to-value and debt-to-income ratios. With the current rules set to expire at the end of next month, the Moon Jae-in government is mulling over lowering the ratios to cut the borrowable amount and adopting DSR, a debt service ratio which would add other existing loans, interest, and annual income to the loan review process. During his confirmation hearing, then-candidate for Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs Kim Dong-yeon spoke on the issue.
When it comes to LTV and DTI, there are other factors to consider other than the overheating property market and household debt. So we'll study them closely and decide after consulting with relevant ministries.
Korea's household debt was seen barreling very close to the 1.36 quadrillion won mark, or $1.2 trillion in the first quarter. Also, with the U.S. central bank on an upward rate trajectory, pressure could mount on the Bank of Korea to tighten its monetary policy, pressure that would be passed on to loan holders at a time when private consumption sentiment is already low. These are all facets that President Moon's advisors will consider as they draw up a plan by August, when new rules affecting household debt are set to take effect. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
The Asian Development Bank and a UN Commission for the Asia and the Pacific held a forum here in Seoul to discuss how to build resilience and sustainable growth across economies in the region. While there has been substantial progress in enhancing trade and investment within the region, experts at the forum said there needs to be closer cooperation to safeguard local markets against various global risks, such as the rise of U.S. interest rates and growing trade protectionism around the world. Responding to challenges posed by climate change and disasters is another area that requires stronger cooperation. To effectively coordinate regional efforts for socioeconomic advancement, experts called for stronger institutions to enforce various mechanisms and agreements established in the past. We've hit the midpoint of the year, and looking back, we've seen better than expected growth in the Korean economy. At 1.1% in the first quarter, it was the strongest rate in 6 quarters, driven primarily by strong exports. Shipments of semiconductors, steel, and displays drove up the trade surplus, while lifting employment figures in manufacturing and boosting foreign investment in major tech companies. And our Oh Soo-young joins us today to tell us more about this and what we can expect for the Korean economy in the foreseeable future. Hi, Soo-young.
Hi, June.
All right, so can we expect this export-led growth to continue throughout this year?
Well, market watchers certainly seem to think so. While production and investment in facilities for key industrial products did slow down in May, the global demand for semiconductors, solid-state drives, and other key export items are expected to grow. There's also a general consensus that global trade will pick up in the remaining half of the year, as major markets like Japan and those across Europe are experiencing recovery. The Bank of Korea and various think tanks have adjusted their growth projections to 2.6 for this year, based on the better-than-expected performance seen in recent months.
The strong growth of 1.1% we saw in the first quarter is likely hard to sustain due to various global uncertainties, like America's protectionist stance on trade and a hike in its interest rates. Still, the economy could grow at a rate close to 3% this year.
But then what about the ongoing uncertainties in regards to Korea's trade with the U.S. and China? I mean, there has been already some impact because of some trade restriction, I believe.
Well, China's boycott of Korean products and cultural performances, as well as restrictions on travel to the country following Seoul's deployment of the US anti-missile system, has taken a sizable toll on tourism, retail and entertainment businesses in particular. The Bank of Korea says it could drag down GDP growth by 0.2 percentage point this year. But looking long term, experts say the impact is likely to be limited.
Consumer products would be hit the hardest, but capital goods and intermediate products, which make up more than 96% of Korea's exports to China, wouldn't be affected as much. And Korean businesses in those sectors have already been relocating their production facilities from China to Southeast Asian countries since a couple of years ago.
When it comes to the Trump administration's protectionist stance on trade, the government and the steel industry in particular have been preparing for possible restrictions on Korean businesses, even the dismantling of the Korea-US Free Trade Agreement. Down the line, however, a think tank said recently that if the trade agreement is scrapped, it would likely hurt the US more than Korea due to Korea's higher tariff rates. Its simulation found Korea would lose $1.3 billion in exports and the US $1.5 billion, which would still hand Korea a positive balance of trade. In fact, experts say reducing dependence on the US and Chinese markets will present opportunities elsewhere.
I'd be more worried about the slowdown of the US IT industry, which would deliver a blow to Korea's tech exports, and the possible fall in oil prices, which will reduce demand in resource-sensitive markets. As Europe recovers and invests in developing technology in line with the Fourth Industrial Revolution, there will be demand for more products like image sensors and semiconductors. Also, countries in Southeast Asia would need more infrastructure and offer a market for consumer goods. There will also be growing demand for construction in Middle Eastern countries once they stabilize.
So it looks like Korea's trade will remain in the black for quite some time. But how are things faring at home? I mean, it looks like Korean households are reluctant to open their wallets.
Unfortunately, structural problems in the domestic economy have given rise to financial instability for the average household. One chronic issue has been the unemployment rate, particularly for youth, which reached record-hitting figures in April, as well as skyrocketing levels of household debt, which has now surpassed $1.2 trillion. Wages haven't kept up with economic growth over the last 16 years, according to recent government data. In fact, household share of the pie has shrunk over the years, with corporations claiming about a quarter of the gross national income, the highest level among OECD countries. So while big conglomerates and export companies saw their profits grow, domestic consumption grew at a sluggish rate of 0.4% in the first quarter.
Of course, there are no quick solutions to these problems. We need to reduce household debt and initiate corporate reform. But ultimately, income needs to increase. That requires tackling unemployment by providing enough jobs, which would in turn generate more consumption from higher incomes.
So income-driven growth, I believe that's the mantra of the new government's, economic policies, and also the rationale behind a recently proposed extra budget.
Absolutely. The extra budget proposal is all about creating quality jobs and stabilising the average citizen's livelihood. If passed, the government will pour $10 billion into the economy to generate more than 110,000 jobs, 70,000 of them directly in the public sector. There have been some voices of concern on whether an extra budget is necessary when the exports have been doing so well, and whether creating public sector jobs would really boost the economy in the long run. But others believe if it's executed well, the positive effects will spill over into various sectors.
Youth employment is still high, and compared to other OECD countries, Korea has far fewer public sector employees, especially in fire stations, the police force, and social welfare. Also, more public jobs will balance out the oversupply of job seekers searching for positions in private companies. And with more income, they are likely to consume more, leading to better economic conditions all around.
The job creation budget proposal also includes more subsidies for small and medium-sized businesses.
Small and medium-sized businesses are closely tied to the health of the domestic economy as they employ most of the population. However, fair trade practices need to be enhanced between conglomerates and SMEs, which need greater protection and nurturing. SMEs are needed to drive innovation as testbeds of creativity and new technologies.
According to the central bank and various local analysts, the overall impact of the budget plan could add an extra 0.2 or 0.4 percentage point to GDP growth. So there will be a lot of eyes on what progress is made on that front.
So we'll be closely following this story from here on out. Thank you so much for the assessment today.
My pleasure.
Korea's ICT exports surged by over 17% in May compared to the same time last year, touching new highs for the month and extending an upward streak to 7 straight months. Data released on Wednesday shows exports totaled $15.4 billion, up over $2 billion on year. Semiconductor exports shot up 56% to account for nearly half of the total ICT export value. This as DRAM and system semiconductors reached monthly highs and NAND flash chips saw prices rise. Outbound shipments for displays also grew for a 7th consecutive month on continued increases in LCD panel unit prices and OLED demand. With the U.S. expected to release the results of its steel imports investigation at the end of this week, Korea's Trade Ministry held an emergency meeting today in Seoul. The investigation was initially expected to be completed next year in January, but the major shift in schedule is adding to concerns that it will produce negative results for Korean steelmakers. Both the government and steel industry believe additional tariffs and restrictions on import volumes may be a possibility. Korea's leading producer POSCO has filed a complaint with the U.S. Court of International Trade against anti-dumping duties and countervailing duties on carbon alloy plates levied by its International Trade Commission. With the second phase of the Seoul-Yangyang Expressway set to open later this month, the eastern Gangwon-do province is about to become much more connected to the greater area of Seoul. Our Elliot Kim has the story.
The new block of road stretches from Donghongcheon to Yangyang, and the June 30th opening will mark completion of the second stage of the Seoul-Yangyang Expressway. The road currently connects Seoul to Donghongcheon, and the new 71.7-kilometer section of the four-lane road will extend that to Yangyang in the eastern Gangwon-do province.
Accessibility to the region was really poor, but with this opening, the inland areas of Yangyang, Inje, and Hongcheon will be easy to get to from Seoul.
The Korea Expressway Corporation expects an estimated 25,500 cars to use the expressway each day, and more than 9.3 million each year. The KEC plans for the road to alleviate traffic on the Yeongdong Expressway, currently used by Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province residents to reach the east coast. Since construction began in 2008, project costs have totaled about $2.1 billion, with work on the second phase beginning in 2013. The expressway has 35 tunnels and 58 bridges, including the 11-kilometer-long Inje Tunnel, the country's longest and the world's 11th longest tunnel. The road cuts 40 minutes from the current fastest routes to Yangyang, with travel times now estimated at 1.5 hours from Seoul and 2.5 from Incheon. The government estimates $170 million in annual benefits from the project due to shorter driving distances and less time spent on the road. This is in addition to the expected increases in tourism in Gangwon-do province and areas along the east coast. The road is also expected to provide extra help during the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
Korea's luxury goods market may only take up a small portion of the global pie, but it's becoming an attractive destination for prominent brands. Major luxury fashion houses are opening their flagship stores, as well as holding fashion shows and exhibitions in the heart of Seoul. Our Lee Joo-young tells us more.
After Paris and Tokyo, Louis Vuitton is now in Korea, bringing its heritage of travel with it. The exhibition, which will be held in northern Seoul until late August, retraces the brand's journey from a historic trunk maker founded in 1854 to the modern luxury giant it has become. Louis Vuitton is just one of the growing number of prominent fashion houses that have brought some of their latest projects to Seoul. French powerhouse Chanel held its first collection in Seoul 2 years ago, while Christian Dior opened a 6-story flagship store, the largest in Asia, in the city.
Korea is important in the global luxury market. Despite the slow economy, these are good marketing strategies to strengthen the value of their luxury goods in the country.
Korea's luxury market is currently valued at about $11 billion, accounting for just under 3% globally. But it stands as the fourth fastest growing luxury goods market in the world, posting real value growth of about 44% in the 5 years leading up to 2016. As one of the leading Asian consumer markets, Korea will likely continue to be eyed by many luxury goods companies looking to lure more loyal customers. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more of the day's top business stories, so don't forget to check back with us then. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.